And it said that we've been weaving, and the threads are the stories. Perhaps we're weaving that prayer mat on which we can rest our forehead. But the threads, the first was that mystical thread of the mystical simurg bird that we hold the feather of. And when we burn that feather, it calls down that bird when we're in times of need. Or that thread of the genie that resides inside of us and knows a magic word that can cast out any demon. Where is that genie? Or that rainbow trilling bird of grace that comes unbidden to us when we don't chase it? Or that jeweler that we are, that has creativity and ingenuity, that can save our dearest belonging and the belonging of anyone else. Or also that cobbler. But first there was the young man whose knowledge of the psychology was able to be used in sending off the bully with a pretended poisoned fish. Or the cobbler who was totally devoted to his task. These are the threads that have been woven so far. Let's see if this story today can elicit in us what the thread is. And it's the story of a young king, a handsome, virile being who longed to be married, but he'd never found a suitable wife. He'd had many princesses been paraded before him, but none of them had made his heart flutter. Until one day, in one of those diversions, because he tried to assuage his loneliness by going out into the forest to hunt, he came across a maiden sitting under a tree with the animals of that area gathered around her while she sorted out the seeds and berries that were her sustenance. He was not only struck by her beauty, but also by her gentle demeanor. So he approached her and asked her who she was and where she came from. But she was not able to say. She just smiled gently at him. But he was smitten, and he decided that this was the bride for him. So he immediately swept her up onto his stallion and rode back to his palace with her, announcing to his mother and his sisters, of whom he had 3, that this was the maiden he was going to marry. So she was dressed in the finest of garments, and a wedding was arranged, and all was well in the kingdom. She was found to be gentle and kind and sweet to everyone, so mostly everyone fell in love with her, except his mother and his sisters, who became very, very jealous of her, as is told in those other stories. And they began to spread rumors about her, not only in the palace, but abroad, everywhere, saying where this waif, this gammon, where did she come from? Nobody knows her background. She could be just a peasant girl, not worthy of being the wife of a king. But she had also had a child, a son, who of course she adored. But the vitriol, the bitterness that abounded, weighed upon her, and she thought to herself, I'm doing my beloved husband a great disservice by staying here, because it seems that I'm breeding venom, poison amongst his people. So she decided that the best thing for her to do was to return from whence she came, back out into the forest, where the animals of the forest and the birds loved her and were harmonious. She had lived well on the berries and seeds of that place. So one day when her husband was out hunting, she wrapped her son in a bundle, put him on her hip, and she left the palace and went out to return from the forest in which she was found. But of course there were spies there who kept an eye on her all the time at the behest of the mother of the king and his sisters. So she was followed by these servants who observed her every move. But to their great surprise, when the maiden and her son arrived at a clearing, those servants beheld a magnificent palace, alabaster walls, marble, cobblestones, golden gates. They were aghast and surprised, because as they observed, as the maiden approached, there was a fanfare of trumpets, and the golden gates were opened, and standing inside the gates was a royal, regal couple, one who was obviously a king in splendid raiment, and a woman who was undoubtedly his queen. And they welcomed the maiden. Oh, our beloved daughter, our beloved princess, we have awaited you. Come, come, and bring those friends that are behind you in. So the princess and her son and the very surprised servants who followed were invited into this magnificent palace and given a feast and hospitality such as these had never known. And of course, they embraced their daughter, the princess, as she had been separated from them for so long. But, of course, as it happened, the king came back to his palace after his hunting and asked where was his beloved wife. But of course the spies had already known the path she had taken. So the king followed, and he too was greatly overwhelmed and awed by the greeting he received when arriving at this magnificent place. He too was feasted and fed. But then the royal couple said to the king and those servants that were there, "Go back to your palace, leave your beloved wife and queen with us for a moment. We will return her to you safe and sound." So the king, followed by those servants that had followed her, went back to the palace, and the maiden princess stayed with her mother and father, who, in seating her down, said to her, "We saw from those celestial realms where we went after we departed this life so many years ago, leaving you to fend for yourself in the forest. But we saw that you were being besieged, really tortured and ill-used. So we came, given 7 days and 7 nights. And so we come for you to confirm your heritage, the place from whence you came. And now we must return, and you must return to your king and your life." And with that, the palace, the royalty, disappeared before the princess's eyes, and she was left holding her babe on her hip, and she returned to her husband and the life that was hers, but now with everyone knowing who and what she was from her lineage. Can you glean what this thread is as we weave it into the other threads to create whatever it is that's forming in us? Perhaps that prayer rug, that prayer mat on which we can rest our forehead, the wholeness. What is this thread? What does this story denote for us? What does it tell us? What is this thread? For some years now, one of the beautiful beings from overseas has posed the question again and again, how can I know that I am a mystic? Again and again, the question has been asked, how can I know that I am a mystic?
I think we're all mystics, if that's what we've forgotten, and we have to rediscover it.
Totally. So could it be that we're weaving this rug that will allow us to claim that we are indeed that mystic. Look, if you will, to what it is that the books, the dictionaries tell us about what a mystic is, and see if you can begin to find yourself in the descriptions that are there. Maybe this will be your thread, maybe even the key. It unlocks all locks. To know what a mystic is, and to claim being that mystic. Could it be the key that opens any door? Test it for yourself. Look up the word mystic. Find out what it means. See if you can find yourself in the description of what is defined in the various dictionaries about what a mystic is. Claim it. Maybe it's our rug, maybe it's our key.